Sub gigs. Why do we do them? How do we do them? And I got two funny stories to tell you all about sub gigs. Hello and welcome to Tim Conley Drums. Today we are going to talk about subbing and sub gigs, why we do sub gigs, how they happen, and I got two stories to tell you that were two sub gigs that really stand out. Okay, so basically a sub gig is when you're not a member of a band and you get called either by the band, the management of the band, your agent, if you have an agent that gets you sub gigs, or maybe somebody you know. There's many ways that you can get a sub gig. You can also get it directly from the musician. So in my case, the drummer would contact me and say, hey, Tim, can you sub for me next Friday? Here's the gig. Here's how much it pays. I get all the information, etc. So sub gigs, there's good and bad things about sub gigs. Now, they're good in the sense that you got some work, you're making some extra money that you didn't expect, because usually sub gigs happen in situations where something happens to the band. The drummer's ill, the drummer gets in some kind of a situation where he can't make the gig, he's got a prior commitment. And of course, the bad is that you don't know what you're getting into. You might not know the songs. You might have to write up a whole pile of charts. It's the fear of the unknown. You don't know anybody in the band, maybe, if it's your first time subbing. Now, if you're a regular sub, it gets easier because even though you might only play with the band once in a while, at least you're playing with them. So there is good, but there's also bad involved in subbing. And some people just don't like the sub because they feel they're out of their comfort zone as well. I can remember subbing for one drummer who was also a friend of mine. And that guy was so busy playing in 4 bands that I used to sub for him all the time, because how do you manage 4 bands? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how he did it, to be totally honest, but he used to play in so many bands, and I used to sub for him all the time just to, help him out as much as I could, if I could. Now, obviously, the sub gigs can only work if the drummer that's subbing is available. So that's another thing. I've had lots of times where I get called to do sub gigs, and unfortunately I cannot do them because I'm already working. That is a difficult thing, especially at the pro level. If you're trying to get somebody to sub for you on a Friday, Saturday without long-term notice, it's very difficult to get a sub because we're all working. That's what we do. We're professional musicians, and Friday, Saturday nights are the main working nights. I also work other nights of the week playing as well, but Friday, Saturday, pretty much a guarantee that if you're a working professional drummer, those 2 nights you're going to be working. It's hard to get a sub. Anyways, let's talk about a couple of stories related to me subbing in. Now, one time, I'll tell you this one story first. It's kind of funny but sad at the same time, this story. I get a call from a female singer that runs a band that I know very well, and I've subbed for her on a fair number of occasions. I get a call at, I think it was 10 o'clock or 9 or 9:30 at night. I can't remember. It might have been 10. I think it was 10. And she's in a bad situation. She's begging me to come and sub because she's just fired the drummer after the first set of a gig. Now, this is unheard of. I was even in shock, and she says, oh, I'll have to tell you about it later, because she was kind of in a panic state. What is she going to do? She still got 2 more sets, and she called me because the gig was not far from where I live. I think it was about 10 minutes away from where I lived, and she knows me, and I was unbelievably available. So I said, yeah, okay, I'll come out and do the gig. And no rehearsal, obviously, just show up, but I knew her set list, and I had subbed with her previously. Now, I hadn't subbed with her for several months, so I was going in there in a situation that can be very stressful because there's no rehearsal. She just hopes that I know the tunes and I can show up. So I agreed to do the gig. So she told me that you just show up and she'll negotiate, how I'm going to get paid and all that stuff later, which I trusted her, so I had no problem with that. Anyways, I show up, and she had explained to the owner what had happened, that she'd fired the drummer and that a replacement drummer was coming in. So the second set is going to be a little bit delayed getting started. And or they ended up doing a couple of acoustic tunes to give me more time to get set up. Or tunes without drums anyways. So, okay, so I show up, I set up. Like I said, they played a couple of tunes without me while I was setting up, which is unusual. It's kind of a distraction because I'm wandering around the drum set and doing stuff, and they're playing and trying to entertain the crowd still. But there's a drummer wandering around the stage. Kind of weird, but she had no choice. And you could tell she was really stressed. The whole band was actually stressed. So anyways, finally I get set up. And 1, 2, 3, boom, start playing, right? And finished the second set, and we extended the second set a little bit, and we took a very short break to get into the third set because of the time restrictions. It was a bar gig, and when you're doing bar gigs, you've got to shut down at a certain time. So she didn't want to disappoint the owner to screw things up, because owners are very particular about times, very particular. So she didn't want to screw things up with the owner, so she did things to accommodate and make him happy, which in the end, the owner, apparently, I didn't speak to him personally because I was just the sub, but she came to me later and said that he was really happy and everything turned out fine. I managed to, muddle my way through the gig, no complaints. Everybody was happy. She thanked me. She actually cried at the end of the gig and gave me a big hug and thanked me for being able to do this. I kind of saved her hiney, but at the same time, I was more than happy to do it because that's what we do. Musicians are a brotherhood, and if we can help each other out, that's what we do. That's what you should do. Now, let me just tell you what happened. I'm not going to name any names, but the drummer that was actually hired for the gig was a fairly famous Canadian drummer. And he started playing in the first set. And first of all, he showed up late. He'd been drinking, and he was being difficult with them. I don't know exactly what his problem was. She didn't know what his problem was, but he just wasn't his normal self. He had been drinking, and he was off, and he was angry, and it just wasn't going well. He didn't play well in the first set, and he was overplaying in a lot of ways. And she said it was almost like he was purposely trying to piss everybody off. He was having a bad day, and he wanted everybody to have a bad day. He didn't care about the band, and he didn't care about the crowd. And he was overplaying, and she was getting annoyed because he's playing all these drum fills while she's trying to sing and lay down, her parts in the tune. And one thing you need to know as a drummer is don't step on the singer's toes with drum fills unless the song actually has that in it. But if you're playing Motown, for example, you're not going to be playing a lot of drum fills if you're playing Sugar Pie Honey Bunch. It's just got, and the singer sings and you just play your groove. There's really not a lot of drum fills except for the legendary Motown drum fill, but that happens when the singer is not singing, and it's a setup fill in the beginning of the song and throughout the song. Whenever there's changes and stuff, you're doing that fill. Anyways, so she says that it just wasn't going well. She was getting pissed off. At the end of the set, he started complaining, and she just said, "Look, I've had it with you. Pack your shit up. You're fired." Now, it turns out he was also a sub. He was subbing in. This was not their regular drummer. So the sub gets fired on the spot after the first set, and another sub comes in. Now, this is unheard of. That only ever happened to me once. In 40 years of live performance, that's only ever happened to me once. And like I said, at the end, actually got a bonus. I remember she paid me more because she really appreciated, even though I only played 2 sets, she really appreciated me coming in and helping them out. And, truth be told, I I actually said, you don't have to do that. You don't have to give me the extra money, but she insisted. I appreciated it. In the end, I ended up taking it, and I shook everybody's hand in the band, and everybody gave me a hug, and I continued to sub in that band. Not very much lately, but I continued to sub in that band. I never was an actual member of the band because the drummer in the band they were a very tight-knit group, and they didn't want to fire their drummer. But he was a working guy too, like a working musician, and often subbed out. It's just one of those things. Now, the other story I wanted to tell you about subbing is another unusual sub story. So I get called, I think it was on a Sunday, from an agent that is looking for a drummer to sub in for this Led Zeppelin tribute that's coming into town. And it's a 3-night sub. It's going to be Thursday, Friday, Saturday of that week. And my this particular agent knows that I had played in Zeppelin subs, or Zeppelin tribute bands rather, in the past. And he just said, hey, can you fill in for these 3 nights? It's at the Boston Manor. I remember where the gig was, in Burlington. And the Boston Manor, I don't think it exists anymore, but it used to do strictly tribute bands. So I agreed to do this gig, and I actually got a rehearsal. So I got one rehearsal. So I ended up meeting up with the guys, met everybody. I didn't know anybody in the band, met up, and the rehearsals went fine. I obviously had some time to prepare. I wrote out some charts. They gave me a set list, and I prepared. Plus, I already knew a lot of the songs, and I prepared. So I practiced a little bit, and this was a lot less stressful in the beginning than the first story that I told you, where it was an emergency. This one, it's still stressful because of one rehearsal, and I only got a few days to prepare, but I can handle it. So go to the rehearsal's fine. At the end of the rehearsal, the bass player tells me, oh, by the way, when you don't bring any of your gear except for maybe a bass drum pedal or your stool, and of course your drumsticks, because we have a replica John Bonham drum kit, the gold colored kit. I don't have an actual picture of the actual drum kit. I can just show you a picture of Bonzo's kit so you can get an idea of what the kit looked like. But it was that clear one, the one you could see through, and it kind of had a yellow hue to it. Anyways, I didn't think anything of it. I just said, oh, that's cool. That's awesome. Great. Look forward to it. So Thursday rolls around, and I show up for sound check, and I look at the drum kit, and then all of a sudden it hits me. Bonzo used to play a 26-inch bass drum. Well, I've never played a 26-inch bass drum in my life, and it never dawned on me. When we were rehearsing, it was a 22-inch because it was a rehearsal place. So we didn't have the drum kit there that we were going to be using in the show. This was a rehearsal kit. It never dawned on me until I got there. 26-inch bass drum. I've never played one. Is this going to change things? Well, I get behind the kit at the sound check, start playing a few of the tunes with the band. Oh my God, the feel was completely different. You got to remember, the bass drum's freaking huge. 26-inch bass drum. That's 4 inches bigger than a normal, what I'm used to, which is, a 20 or a 22. That's quite a bit, maybe even like that. And that's all the way around the kit. So the toms are going to be higher. The bass drum pedal, where it hits on the head, is not dead center. It's going to be lower. And the feel of the pedal off of the bass drum head was completely different than what I'm used to, because I usually tune up the bass drum a little bit higher because I like to get a nice bounce off that. My bass drum technique, I like to bounce off of the head. I never bury the beater. Never. I always get a bouncing technique, almost like a free stroke or a molar stroke off the bass drum. That's the way I play bass. Now, I have some videos on my technique if you want to check that out on my channel. Anyways, so we're doing the sound check, and I'm struggling. I'm going to be totally honest. Now, nobody in the band said anything to me during the sound check, but you just know when you're struggling. So sound check is complete, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like, I just didn't know what to do. So I'm just like, I can't say I can't do it. I can't ask them to switch the kit out for my own kit. So I adjusted my bass drum pedal just a little bit, and I just decided I'm just going to have to do what I can. Now, it was so difficult playing some of those Bonham licks, especially because Bonham is so bass drum heavy. It was a challenging gig. Now, I'm going to tell you guys, I did get through it, even though I made a fair number of mistakes. Plus, I had to not play certain things that I just couldn't pull off in the heat of the moment at the tempo. Now, nobody has said anything to me except for the bass player. He obviously noticed that I was struggling a little bit, and I just told him the truth. I said, look, man, I'm struggling because I'm not used to playing with a 26-inch bass drum. So that was a bit of a nightmare gig for me, subbing, and I learned my lesson, though. Always ask if they say, we have a drum kit. I should have known this from casino gigs, because casino gigs provide, quite often, not always, not every casino, but some casinos provide you with a kit, and those kits are usually garbage because they're just being abused by everybody that comes in there. So I learned my lesson from casinos and from that gig. Anytime I sub and they say, don't bring your kit, we have one, always ask about the equipment. Now, agents will lie to you. Oh yeah, the drum kit's great. Never had a complaint. It's awesome. You're going to love it. It's a Gretsch, legendary Gretsch kit. Then I get there and the thing is garbage and the heads are beat up, sawdust everywhere from drumsticks getting filed down from drummers playing. The stage is usually dirty. I mean, it's a bit of a nightmare when you're using the house kit. But in this case, the drums were actually really beautiful. They were awesome. The stage was really nice. It was great. It was just that I'm not used to playing with a 26-inch bass. I don't know if you guys, any of you have ever played with, to this day, by the way, I've never played with a 26-inch bass. Now, you're probably wondering, well, you said you used to play in a Bonham Tribute. I did, but I didn't use a 26-inch bass. I had a sort of a Bonham kit, but it wasn't a replica with the exact 26-inch bass drum. I didn't have that when I did the Zeppelin thing. I didn't have the money to buy a whole new drum kit, a Zeppelin kit, because they are expensive drum kits. So I kind of used what I had and sort of altered it a little bit as I could to make it appear to be a Zeppelin kit, but really only diehard fans notice the difference anyways. But I managed to get through those gigs because I was using a 22-inch bass, which is what I almost always use, a 22 or a 20, occasionally an 18. But I'm fine with smaller drum kits because I'm used to playing them, but I'm not fine with the 26. I'd be interested to actually check out a 26-inch kit again. It would be nice to be able to actually get some practice time, especially if I'm going to do that kind of a gig again. Now, I only subbed for that band those 3 nights. I never sub for them again. Maybe I didn't play that great as I thought. They just didn't say anything to me and decided we're not going to hire this guy again. That could have been the case. I don't think it was that bad, but that could have been the case. Or they were a band from out of town. They actually were from the U.S., so they are touring around. They're a Zeppelin tribute that tours. So they maybe didn't want to hire me again because they didn't have a need for me. So whatever. I did the gig. I got paid in the end. Everyone was happy. I never had anyone come up to me from the audience when we did a meet and greet and say, yeah, you played terrible or whatever. So all in all, I think it was good. But let me know, guys, about you subbing. If you do a lot of sub gigs, I used to sub a lot in the past. I remember my drummer friend, Jeff Salem. I used to sub for him all the time because he's a very hard-working drummer, Jeff. And I used to sub for him, especially in this disco band that he used to play in. And, he was traveling and touring, and he was doing percussion, and he was playing drum kit. And he's a very busy, to this day, he's still a super busy player. But anyways, thanks very much for watching. I'm interested to hear from you guys about sub gigs that you've done. I'm going to do a part 2 to this because I also got a couple of other stories, but I just didn't want to make this video too long. Anyways, Thanks a lot for watching. And as always, keep drumming. See ya.